Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and here's another video involving the Ford 5000 tractor. Initially I wasn't even going to make a video of this repair because I thought that it was going to be a fairly simple ordeal, and it's turned into a real mess for me. So I thought maybe I'd make this video just because it might be fun to watch me suffer, and also in case somebody else is looking to do this repair, maybe I can give them some tips, or they can at least watch some of the mistakes I've probably made. So in the last video I was working with this Linebach post hole digger, and I was doing a test of it, and I realized when I was doing the test that there's an issue with this tractor that I've had since I've had the tractor. The PTO lift control lever is very stiff to move. I mean, so stiff to move that I have to sometimes get out of the operator's seat and push it with my leg, my foot. So that's something that I have just been living with when brush hogging, because it hasn't been critical to have that real fine control and ease of control. And I can actually move it from the operator's seat, but it's pretty difficult. But if I want to make it go the full range of movement, I've got to push it with my foot. So I got to get that straightened out. Well, so I figured if I could get to the pivot point for that lever, that maybe I could figure out what the heck was going on with this thing and lubricate it without having to take too much apart. That ended up not being the case at all. Let me start by warning you that if you are going to undertake this repair and you have the row crop style tractor, which I have, which has these massive box shaped fenders on it with the two headlights in the front, it's pretty much almost impossible to take that assembly apart. At least that's what I'm running into. You get a lot more clearance and room to work on it if you get the fender off. Ideally, you take that wheel off too on the right side of the tractor, and then you'd really have a ton of clearance. But that wheel weighs a ton, and that's a whole nother ordeal that that's a whole nother ordeal that I don't want to get into, so we won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. It was bad enough getting this fender off. This fender, by the way, is a lot heavier than it looks, so I would suggest maybe two people. You also want to make sure you disconnect the wiring for the headlights. It actually comes down on the bottom here. This is the wiring going to the headlights, and it's just a simple couple of these type of connectors here that pull out. Now, what holds the fender on to the axle is this big, almost like a U-bolt, square bolt deal. It comes up underneath the axle and comes up through these two holes and has two nuts on it, washers and nuts on it. The huge nuts that were on here, this one wasn't too bad. I was able to break it free and then use the Hercules Ultra Torque impact on it and got that one off. This one started to come off and then just stopped, and it was like really stuck tight. I ended up having to put a breaker bar on it with a pipe and could only turn it like about maybe 30 degrees before I had to reset the breaker bar position. So it took me forever. I was out here until after dark last night to get that off. And I can now see that the threads on this are all buggered, so I'll have to deal with that when I do reassembly. So this is the lever in question right here. So it's very hard for me to move this lever. Now there is a tension adjustment on this assembly that's supposed to allow you to adjust the tension so that you have enough tension on there so this lever can't creep out of position on you when you're working. But at the same time is not so tight that you can easily move it from the operator's seat. This is much harder to move than it should be. So the first thing I needed to do is I wanted to open this up. So there's a cover that goes here. This is the cover right here that I removed. And the problem with removing this cover on this tractor, and it might not be the same on non-row crop models, but on this tractor, this cover is on here, and this little metal bracket right here, okay, that actually screws to the cover right in this location here. This ends up being wedged between this cover and the fender right here. This is actually, this edge right here is pushed hard up against that fender. And I can't figure out how to get this cover off because it won't fit past this cover. This knob on the top is tapered and it won't fit past the taper no matter where you try and push it through. So the only way to get this cover off of this lever right here would be to either remove this knob, which I can't figure out how this is held on there, and I'm scared that if I force it, I'm going to break it, so I don't want to deal with that. Or this is a two-piece lever right here, and it's held together. The upper piece is held to the lower piece with these two fasteners right here, which are funky. I can't tell what the heck's on the backside here. If these were nuts, they're not nuts anymore. They're just like rounded, rusted mess. So I'm going to leave that alone also. So by loosening the fender and tilting it out, I was able to get this out of the way by unbolting it and sliding it up enough so that I could then remove this. Removing this involves removing these large Phillips head screws, which are a bear to get out because they're all rusted. You can't really get PB Blaster or any kind of penetrant like that anywhere near a lot of these threads because they're on the back side. These I was able to, but some of the other ones you just can't. This hole, by the way, is for the end of the shaft that we're dealing with to stick out. And there's a nut on the end, and it looks like there's a spring in there. I took it all apart, and I think it was a spring, or what's left of a spring. And the idea would be you would adjust. It's a self-locking nut, so it doesn't want to, it stays tight on the threads, so it won't move out of position. But you unscrew that or screw that in to adjust the tension on the lever. That's how it's supposed to work, but mine's not working like that at all. I've got the nut completely off and the spring completely off, and it's still tight as heck. As far as getting these screws out, I recommend applying heat, applying penetrant when you can get to the threads, and then also I recommend starting them by just hunkering down and clamping on them hard with vice grips to get them started. If you're fortunate enough to get them started, a number 3 Phillips bit fits in there well enough that you should be able to get most of them out, unless they're the ones that just want to snap anyways. The other trick is when you're backing them out and it starts to get tight, try tightening it back in. Try reversing direction a little bit. What that does is that gives you the ability for the threads to actually shed some of that crud, rust and everything that they've been trying to get rid of. So you end up actually using the outer threads actually act almost like a die and kind of clean the threads as you go along, but you don't want too much crap to build up in there. So now we're looking from the rear of the tractor, and I removed this cover. The dirty little secret about this cover is that it actually has a flange at a 90-degree angle to this that goes behind this cover. So you have to remove these 2 screws. You remove these 2 screws and these 4 screws, and you can get that cover off. So this is the nut that I had previously removed. This is the self-locking nut. So behind this there was a spring, and the spring was pushing on this. So here's the lever. Notice the lever moves completely free for that little amount right there. It's not until the lever starts to engage the shaft that it's supposed to move that it starts to that it is bound up. So it's not the lever being seized onto the shaft, it's the shaft itself is being seized. This shaft, by the way, supports this arm, which is, it's got a Woodruff key, it's keyed to the shaft that moves this linkage that goes down to this pin that engages this linkage. So my first question I had was, well, what's actually bound up? Well, we know it's not this part right here, that's moving, right? So it's either this shaft is bound up, or through the linkage engaging this shaft is bound up. So what I did was I took off the spring clip on the back side of this pin. So this pin is supposed to now slide right out. It is seized into this arm, but it's not seized into the arm next to it. So if I can get this whole assembly right here off, that will just slide out. This upper pin right here that actually joins this linkage to this part right here is actually pressed in to this arm. So by design, that's not made to come out. So this and this piece and this piece stay together. So once I take this nut off and I have all this off, this piece is supposed to just slide off of this shaft, but it is stuck on there. I can even see the woodruff key now. I have this space right here where my finger is, this little space right here, that wasn't there. I was able to move this out that far by sticking a wedge behind there and pounding it in. So I was able to get it to move out that far, and then it started to get dark, or too dark for me to see what I was doing. Plus I wanted to make sure that this is put together the way I thought it was. So fortunately I was able to find an exploded view for this on the Messick's website and was able to confirm what I suspected, which is that this threaded area on the end here is part of a long rod, is part of a long shaft that goes through this area right here, which is where it's probably seized. And this is the other end of the shaft, this very large part that sticks out here, and there's a nylon bushing right there, and that's supposed to be what it's so that you've got some so you've got reduced friction between this and this plate right here. So in an ideal world, when everything isn't all seized up, you take this nut off, you take the spring off, this slides off, you take the woodruff key out, this lever slides off, and this whole shaft just moves out back that way and empties this part right here, so you can lube it and put it all back together. But this is all seized up. I put the nut back on here because last night I was trying banging on this with a hammer to see whether or not it would move at all. It does not want to move. Today I'm going to see whether or not I can put a puller on to pull this off. If I could pull this off, I can get this lever off and I can expose what's behind here, which might let me get some PB blaster in there and maybe some heat on here to drive that whole shaft out. I also want to mention that I found that there's two bolts that attach this bracket to the tractor, and if you take these two bolts out, theoretically, you should be able to take this whole assembly out. The problem is, in order to do that, this has to come with it, and this is still attached by two Phillips head screws over on this side and one on the front that comes through, and you can see it actually right here, rusted as hell. To make matters worse, the lower part of the bracket actually is the pivot point for where this linkage that I was talking about right over here goes down to. And that's got another shaft that goes through and disappears inside here. And when I tried pulling this out, it only came out a short ways and then stopped, and I couldn't figure out why. But now that I look at the parts diagram, it's because on the other side of this shaft that goes inside the tractor, there's actually another part that is held on by a retaining ring. So unless I'm wrong about this, which I don't think I am, there's no way to remove this bracket from the tractor unless you actually are opening up the transmission and able to get to the other side of this lower shaft that passes through the bottom of this bracket. All right, so now I'm going to try banging on this right here, and if this gap closes up, then I know that means that this whole shaft is moving through this, and they should see a gap open up on this side over here. All right, doesn't appear to be moving at all. Again, I can't really get a good swing on it because the tire's in the way. So I think if I recall my physics correctly, I can make up for the lack of swing that I'm able to get with this hammer by using a hammer with a lot more mass, so that the shorter distance of swing will still equate to more force being placed on the end of that shaft. You'll notice I still have the nut on there. I placed the nut back on there to protect the threads on the end here from this this assault. But I've got to be careful because, but even with that nut on there, I could still end up damaging the end of this shaft. So I'm not going to try this too much longer before I go to plan B.
Alright.
I'm satisfied that is not moving at all. Alright, maybe I should go back to something I was having success with, which was moving this part off of this shaft. So you can see I've moved it about 3/16 of an inch. If I'm able to pop this off of the shaft, I think this lower pin will slide out and I can just take that whole assembly off. That will isolate this upper lever and shaft assembly from the rest of the unit, and I can make sure that I am correct about it being seized up here and not further down somewhere. So what I've got is I've got various chisels that I use as wedges. And I've just got my fingers caught in there. Son of a... Ah! Well, that was hilarious. Alright, so I widened up the space on this side, so now that whole thing's cocked a little bit, so I'm going to drive another chisel in the back side here. Alright, so remember I told you that you guys can watch me make mistakes. This little arm right here is cast. This is a cast piece and I just cracked it. I actually can't see the crack now that I took the chisel out, but when I was pushing this chisel in, I saw it crack appeared right there. Yeah, see, now that comes out easily because I've now pushed it out. Ow. There we go. See the rust falling out of there? So now should be able to get this pin should be coming out here. That's what, now this lever has a pin in the bottom here that's not coming out. I can't get to the back side of the pin with a hammer. There's no way to get in there. Actually, with a really small hammer, I wish I could. A jeweler's hammer. The hammer didn't work. Let's see if this works. Wow. Come on, really? Alright, I'll try from laying underneath the tractor. I'll try putting the chisels in there. There we go. That's working. Alright, actually I think I've got that moved out enough now so I can go back to up here. There we go. Okay, that is now free from that shaft. So, yeah, and that shaft is still hard to move. Okay, but I'm going to take that all the way off. I'm going to have to get that nut off. Can't quite get the angle, but it popped out right there. Another trick I used was once I had the space large enough, I was able to put the open end wrench in there to take up some space and then go back at it with the pry bar. Working at it, and it finally popped out. It just fell on the ground. So there it is. So this pin is press fit into this cast piece. But this pin right here that's still stuck in there is just a clevis pin. And actually, that actually snapped. Wow. So in the end, rather than... So I wonder if the end of that's still in there, in that hole. Wow, it actually is. So I was able to put enough tension on that thing to actually snap the pin before it wanted to actually, before the end of that pin wanted to actually come back out of that lever. So, but this pin right here is not supposed to be seized in this arm like this. So we'll have to knock that out and put a new clevis pin in there.
That's easy enough. This joint here moves freely enough. We'll lube it up anyways. I actually can't see the crack. Maybe I was hallucinating, but I'm almost positive. No, there it is right there. Yeah, of course it cracked right there where the keyway is. Of course. So that was my critical error right there. I was prying in this area right here where it's the thinnest. So there's a hairline crack right there. You can't see it on the casting side where it's dirty, but if you put strain on it, it'll open up. That's a bummer. From the front of the tractor, I can just about get the camera in there at an angle where you can actually see the broken off piece in the hole. And like I said, now that this is completely disconnected and it's still stiff, then I know that my problem lies in this shaft being bound in this area right here. So I'm wondering if I can't slide this whole assembly off the shaft. It's going to be a little tough with this guard and kind of holding the lever in there. It does move. So it looks like that Woodruff key does two jobs. It actually keeps that lever that I just removed keyed to the shaft, but it also keys this lever to the shaft. I was just going to see if I could stick the screwdriver in there, and then I just realized I'm going to crack this casting right here. So I'm going to go easy with this. Matter of fact, why am I not thinking to put something on there? Let me see if I can get a brush on there to clean that up any. Alright, took my die grinder, I took my right angle die grinder with a flat disc and cleaned that up. That should help. If I try and put anything in this tiny space back here and try and pry here, I'm just going to snap this casting. I just know it. So I am going to now abandon trying to remove this off of the shaft. I need to push the shaft out that direction anyways through this. So my thinking now is, as I push this shaft back that way, it should move through this, and this will be supported all around by this plate, which should keep it from cracking. Now I got to come up with a trick to get this out, because I know hammering on it's not working. Have I ever told you guys how much I love screw jacks? Well, I do. This is my little Armstrong screw jack, and I'm probably going to run out of travel long before I get this thing as far as I need it to go, but I will at least be able to, satisfy proof of concept, I believe is what engineers might say. I don't know. I'm not an engineer. Anyways, I got this 4x4 in here because the tire is not flat, and the tire, if I put pressure in one spot on the tire, it's going to deflect a lot more, as opposed to if I spread the pressure out across the whole tire, which I effectively am doing by having the 4x4 basically up against the bottom of the tire and up against the top of the tire. So now I'm spreading all of this force that I'm going to generate here across more of an area. Now, if I remember anything about my physics, I think because what is that, moments of force, I don't know what the heck you call it there, but the whole idea is this point right here is a lot closer to this end than that end, so it's not evenly distributed. I bored my camera to sleep. Actually, the battery died, but we're just going to see if we can make this move at all. I can always change the size of the wood that I put in here, put a larger jack in as necessary. So right now I can clearly see this whole post is just moving in this direction, compressing the tire. That I expected, but at some point the amount of force it's going to take to compress the tire is going to hopefully be less than the amount of force for that shaft to want to move the other direction. The other thing I'm wondering about is I'm wondering whether or not I should heat this up. But then again, it's not completely seized. The shaft is rotating in there. It's just rotating with a lot of difficulty, so I don't think I want to go medieval on it. Mainly I'm worried about this nylon bushing right here. I don't know how much heat that would take. What I'm hoping is, I'm just going to hear a sudden creak, which would indicate that all of a sudden it decided to move. Oh, I am out of the threads. Okay. Well, I underestimated the ability of this tire to compress. I was running out of room on the screw length on that last screw jack, so I changed to a smaller plank so I can get a little bit larger jack in there. Well, I might go back to that idea, even though I've been experiencing failures. I didn't have a board long enough to span this whole tire and allow me to put one of the better screw jacks in that I have. It's just a little bit too long for the big 1x that I had in there. So I went back to looking at this, doing what I said I wasn't going to do, prying on this thing. But lo and behold, by just kind of being pretty ginger with it, I've got this thing out pretty far. Enough so that I think now I can safely get this off without breaking it. Might not like it, but it is moving. So oddly enough, what's holding it now is the actual lever itself. I think if I just take out these two screws, I could take this bracket off. All right, I'll drop that screw in the ground. And that lets me take this out, which is what was keeping that lever from being able to want to move out. I kind of think of it, it's a good thing I did decide to go back to taking this handle off, because now that I think of it, that Woodruff key can't stay in this shaft if I expect to push this shaft out through here. There we go. Get that key pulled out. Yeah. I have a lot of different vice grips, and these look almost identical, but if you look more closely at the jaws, these jaws are trashed. These jaws at the tip still have the little dimpled or serrated edge there, which is what makes these good for this kind of a job, where I'm trying to grab onto something I don't have a lot to grab onto. Yeah, these can be a pain. Sometimes you can tap it with a chisel from the side. That just took off the corner. And I'm going to try some heat. Boy, this Woodruff key is really being a pain. I've got this deal here, this tool. Just basically, it's a slide hammer attached to a vice grip plier, and this has worked for me in the past. But I don't know if I've ever encountered one as stubborn as this one. It ain't working. Alright, I just popped out the two bolts that are holding this bracket to the tractor, because I want to make sure I'm not mistaken. If the parts diagram is showing me what I think it's showing me, then I shouldn't be able to take this out. Yeah, still get the same problem. Only comes out that far, and then it won't come out any further. This part right here, if I was able to take this part off of the shaft that it's on, then maybe this whole part that's welded to the bracket right here would slide over that shaft and allow me to take this whole assembly off and leave that shaft behind. You can see the shaft going in there. That, according to the parts diagram, goes into something in there that it doesn't disconnect from. Well, after what seems like an eternity, I have finally started to make some progress with getting this Woodruff key out. I've decided to go back to attempting to get this whole bracket off as an assembly so I can press this out in my press. It's going to be a lot easier than trying to rig something up over here. I marred up this shaft a little bit with the vice grips trying to turn it while I had the lever off. And I mean, that's how hard this is to turn. Without the lever on there to give you that extra mechanical advantage, it's really, really tight. So I decided to get back to pondering the possibility of removing this part right here. So this was held in with a roll pin. So I knocked the roll pin out. That was easy, especially when you have roll pin punches. So roll pin punches, they look just like drift pins, but they have a little tiny ball at the end. And they come in different sizes, and the ball fits perfectly in the inner hole in the roll pin, and you get enough of an edge there to drive out the pin. Great tool. In all my years of hunting and scrounging tools, I've only found that one set ever. I'm sure they have them online, easy to get. But I mean, as far as finding them in the wild, not that common. Now remember, the reason why I hesitated, I think I mentioned this a while ago, possibility of taking that off, but I kind of hesitated because I expected that to be badly seized on there. Turns out, when I tapped on the shaft in the middle here, that shaft will move into the housing just enough so that you can actually start to break this free. And I actually started to pry it with a pry bar, and I got it to move out even further. But then I got to a point where it's kind of like the pry bar isn't really giving me enough leverage. Then I remembered that I bought this monster a while back. Probably paid 10 or 15 bucks for it. Boy, that would be really handy at some point. I actually thought of it as being handy in like working the brush mower into position when I'm trying to get it onto the hitch, that kind of thing. Now, I don't have any modern quick hitch stuff in my collection, but I don't know whether or not this is a bridge worker's tool or a railroad tool. The reason why I say that is because on the one end it's got this point, which would be perfect for like if you've got two things, a hole going through and two different things, and you're trying to get the holes to line up. You get this in there, and you could use this to work them at the position. So then you could put your rivet or your bolt in, and then this handy pry bar on the other end. But I already discovered that it's the perfect tool for getting this collar off. So from this angle, you could just see the end of that piece. Okay, moved it out about another 3/4 of an inch to an inch, but now I'm kind of running up against my limit again. Need to stick something in there as a spacer. There it is. So now if I take these two bolts out again, I think I can take this whole bracket off. Hanging up right on the end of that shaft. I'm just going to hit it with the flap disc real quick. Shaft. Oh yeah, it's coming off easily now. Well, now that's coming out. The damn inner part that wouldn't come out before because I thought that it was attached to something that won't come out is coming out now. Or it just slides off of this other shaft. Yeah, no, that other shaft doesn't come out. I could feel it. It's linked to something in there, so I'm going to leave that alone. We don't need it. I mean, we need it. We don't need it out. So here it is. Finally out of the tough spot to work on it. So now I want to drive this shaft out this way. This will come with it. It's seized up in here. The other thing I was worried about, which made me decide to attempt to take this whole bracket out again, was I noticed that I really can't see underneath the seat area. There's mechanicals under there that without removing the whole seat assembly and everything, I can't even see. And I was worried that if I started to drive this out this direction, that this back of this piece right here would encounter an obstruction inside there that I can't feel or see. And then I'd be in for a world of hurt, and the only way to move forward at that point would be to take the bracket out anyways. Or remove the whole seat and see whatever it was hitting, see if whatever it was hitting could be removed. I know I'm saying the seat, but that shaft is way down here. So that shaft would be going into an area in here, and there is some stuff in the way. I just don't know whether or not it's far enough over or not. So I'd have to take the seat off and take this whole sheet metal housing off, which would not be easy. In case there was still any doubt, it was rust. Look at all the rust on there. Dry as a bone and rusty. I'm amazed it turned at all. And judging from the amount of pressure that I had to use in my 20-ton press to get this thing to start budging and the creaking it was making, I have severe doubts as to whether or not my screw jack setup would have even worked, even if I did have a better backing, way to back it up so that the tire wasn't flexing. So I'm glad I decided to take this out and do it this way. So now I'm going to go to work cleaning up this shaft, cleaning up that bore as best as I can so that that spins freely in that bore. So I just hit this with the flap disc and cleaned this up, and already, this is a lot looser. In fact, there's actually some play in there. This is already worn from years of use, I guess. Either that or the tolerance isn't very tight on this. So, as bad as this was stuck in here, it's not like this is a solid steel piece right here with a hole through it that this is in contact with the entire inside diameter here. This is just a tubular steel piece. So this is actually supported on this end, and on this end only by about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch at the most, before it goes into the empty void inside between the ID of this larger tubing and the shaft. But I'm wondering whether or not water can collect in there over time. I don't know. But anyways, so yeah, the inside of that tube, there's all kinds of crud and stuff in there. I'll try and blast that out. But as far as cleaning up the bearing surfaces, it's really just a matter of cleaning up this little area here and this little area here. I'll whiz this a little bit more. I think I cleaned so much of the oxide off of this thing that I reduced the diameter. Either that or it's never been designed to be a very tight fit. I'm debating whether or not to put anti-seize compound on here instead of grease. I'll go with grease. So I've begun reassembly. This shaft moves freely now, like it should. This right here I cleaned up really well, so it slides on really easily. This I am going to put anti-seize on that shaft. The reason why I'm going to use anti-seize there is because this is not meant to turn on that shaft. This is pinned in position on the shaft, so it doesn't rotate on the shaft. And if I ever need to take this off again, I was just lucky this time that there was still some grease left in there that I was able to get this off, and it wasn't super easy. Once you knock that roll pin out, this should slide off fairly easily. So I'm going to use anti-seize there. But before I put the anti-seize compound on, because it's real messy, I'm going to temporarily put this on and make sure that it's working correctly. I had already bolted the bracket back on, and now I realize that when I go to slide this on, even though I clean this up really well, that shaft moves so easily in that the shaft moves in too far. I can't get the hole to line up. So what I'm going to do is I unbolted that bracket. I'm going to move it out of the way far enough so I can just get something, pliers or something, on the back of the shaft. Although that shaft is actually in a tube and you can't see it. Well, I've got to figure out a way to keep that shaft from moving in when I go to put this on. And then I'll temporarily put a drill bit that fits this hole in here. And I'll start the tractor and I'll work the lever and I'll make sure everything's working correctly. I want to make sure I didn't get anything out of alignment there with the linkage inside there that I can't see. Heaven forbid that's the case, because if that's the case, I'm going to be grief-stricken. Now for a minute there I thought it wasn't working, but that was just because I had this lever out of position. This lever here is the one that selects whether or not it's going to be, what mode the 3-point hitch is going to be in. If you're going to have it in draft mode or position mode. Draft is like if you're pulling a plow and it hits an obstruction, it automatically, the hitch will respond to that and lift the plow up a little bit to get over the obstruction so you don't tear out something. But now that I know that that's working correctly, I'm going to carefully remove it, put some anti-seize on there, and put a new roll pin in there. So I made sure I cleaned up the keyways on both of those lever assemblies that slide onto the shaft, and also the keyway slot on the shaft itself. They tend to get a little bit dinged up when you're, trying to get a Woodruff key that's stuck in there out of there. And I used a brand new Woodruff key because the other one, again, gets a little deformed from all of the pulling, and the teeth marks from even the vice grip teeth marks can follow you up and make it real difficult to put this back together. That goes for any time you're putting a keyed hub onto a shaft. I didn't have a lot of clevis pins, but as luck would have it, I had one left of the size that I needed for this job. I cleaned up the holes there so that moves nice and freely. That one joint that doesn't come apart there on the lever, I just sprayed that with PB Blaster. It's not all locked up, so it should work fine. Everything was humming along smoothly until I got to the point where I looked at the spring that I took off, and it is in really rough shape. It's an unusual little spring because it's very short. It's literally 2 coils, and it's very thick, so it's very stout, but it's really rusty. And it almost looks like there's so much rust in between the coils that it's bottomed out. So I don't know if this is going to work at all. But that's not the kind of spring I'm going to be able to find in my local hardware store. So I figure what I'll do is, let's tighten it down and see what happens. Well, I just ordered a brand new spring because this one is toast. It actually moves too easily now. Good news is it'll be easy to replace that spring when it comes in. All you have to do is take this nut off, washer off, take the spring out, and I think I can do that with the cover on because of the hole that's right here in the cover. But just to be on the safe side, until that part comes in, I think I'm going to leave this open. In the meantime, since by default it wants to pull the lever this way, which is all the way down, I've got a pair of almost like needle-nosed vice grips that I think I can use as a stop on here. This slot in the side right here on the bracket that I put on, that's actually for a stop you can set with this wing nut, but it was so rusted it snapped. And unfortunately, the way this is made is you've got this odd shaped piece of metal that sits behind there, and it's got a stud on it. So when this snapped off, it's not like it was just a bolt that I can replace. I need this thing and a new wing nut. Actually, I could probably even reuse the wing nut if I wanted to go through the trouble of getting that out of there. But so hopefully that part's still available. If it's not, what I'll end up doing is I'll probably end up grinding this off flush, drilling this out, and threading in a small piece of all thread to recreate this. I wonder if that's what that is. Notice the little indentation in the back there. I wonder if that's what they did. I don't know.
Hey guys, before I had a chance to edit this video, the delivery of the torsion spring came in that I picked up off of eBay. I got this, so interestingly enough, this spring is made in the UK, just like the tractor. I fully expected this to be an aftermarket replacement to come in from China or somewhere in Asia, and it turned out no, it's actually a spring that was made in the good old United Kingdom. Kind of neat, I guess. Take my little temporary locking mechanism off. And as we see, that's way too loose. So. Still doesn't seem to be holding that well. That's like max tight that I can get that. So it's better than it was, but that's still not right. Hey guys, so I was doing this repair on this tractor, and I haven't finished editing the video yet, but I've actually been doing some brush hogging and just been living with the fact that this lever doesn't stay in position. I've been using this little miniature vice grip here to basically keep this. Okay, so here's the thing. I finally decided I got to figure out what's going on with this thing. Now, some of you guys who know these Ford tractors and have worked on this problem before probably were having a really good giggle at my expense. So I was thinking about how this works, and I was thinking about how this spring, when it, the spring was bad, obviously, but I got the new spring in there. I tightened the spring down as much as I can, and it still doesn't really do anything. And then it occurred to me, this whole area right here, this whole part, see how this is a very large flange? It's about like 3 inches in diameter. That flange would be, between this flange and this surface, would be the perfect place to put some sort of a friction material so that this didn't move so easily. So my plan was to actually cut a rubber disc and put it in there and see if that would do the trick. But then I thought about it. I said, well, the rubber might bind too much, so that could be a problem. And then I was able to find a exploded view of this, and oddly enough, it was the same exploded view I probably used to get the part number for this spring, to order the spring. And what I didn't notice the first time I looked at that diagram, but when I went back to look at it again, was that it clearly shows that between this part right here and this part right here, that there is a disc that goes in there. And when I searched for that part online, there's plenty of places online to buy that disc. It's a common wear part, and it looks like it's made out of cork gasket material. And then I saw in a forum where a guy said, yeah, he just made his own. He just took some cork gasket material, cut the disc to the dimensions that he needed, stuck it in there, and was off to the races. So don't I feel silly? If anybody wants to know the correct part number to order one of these discs, it's C as in Charlie, 5, N as in November, 518C. And I actually found one place online that actually showed the dimensions, and it shows it as, the thickness as 200 thousandths. So I had some cork gasket material, but it was thinner stuff. So I ended up actually cutting 3 and putting them together, and that gets me to about 180 thousandths without compressing it much under my dial calipers. So I'm going to run with that and see how it works. I was afraid of that. I forgot to account for the fact that this is not going to slide over the key. I don't want to have to deal with taking that key in and out again. Well, I tightened up the tension on the spring. With the 3 discs in there, it does seem to be working. So, we'll see how that goes. I'll probably order one of the correct discs just to have it for the future.